boys and girls, it's been a while. So today I promised a very short video. This is for my AP kids, and it is on error. So in your book, they designate a small space for this, and then they talk about it throughout the chapter, but I want to hit the nail on the head and do it all at once with you. So we're moving into inferential statistics, where we're testing a claim, a hypothesis. So we're either testing the null hypothesis, H sub 0, so this is the null hypothesis, or we're testing H sub A, which is the alternative hypothesis. And a good way to think about this is that all possibilities should be included, okay? So it should either be in the null hypothesis that a free throw shooter is shooting 80% or better, okay, or they're shooting less. And do we have evidence to see either one? So I want to be over here to start out with, okay? And this is my way of thinking about error, okay? This is not the AP way, this is Heidi's way, okay? So Dr. Orloff says, this is the way it is. So going across the top up here is if we have a crystal ball and we know what is true and what is false. Okay? We're not testing a claim. We just are saying, if I had a crystal ball and I was looking into it, I would know that the null hypothesis, we're always talking about the null hypothesis in my model, okay? The null hypothesis is true, okay? Here on the y-axis, so to speak, is the what we find statistically. So if we accept something and it is true, okay, we look in our crystal ball and it says true, then this is the correct decision, okay, because we've accepted something that is true, okay. If we have something that's false and we've rejected it, okay, we've also made a good decision, right? So we've said, that's not true, and then we look in our crystal ball and it says, well, it's not, okay? So this is the correct decision, okay? So whenever we're testing a claim to a certain alpha level or critical level, we have these two things that are the correct decisions. We make errors, okay, based on if we say something, we reject the null hypothesis, and what if it really is true, okay? So we reject it and it is true. This is a type 1 error, okay? And what that means is that we've said, statistically we've said, we're going to reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternative hypothesis, and yet when we look in our crystal ball, it was really true, okay? So it's kind of like your parents accuse you of eating the last brownie, okay? And you say, oh, I didn't do that, okay? Well, maybe you did, maybe you didn't, right? So sometimes they call it correctly and sometimes they call it incorrectly, okay? But more often than not, we're going to say they're correct, okay? Because I'm a parent and I believe that side of it. Okay. Now, the other type of error we have up here is a type 2 error. And that's when we accept something when it's really false. Okay, so we accept that something is the correct answer, or a null hypothesis is correct when it really is not, okay, and it's false. Okay, this can be something that is we want to mitigate type 2 errors in things that are dangerous. Okay, so we want to make sure we actually don't make those errors. Okay, now this is all fine and dandy in my model. Okay, but when we move to the AP model, they mix and match a little bit what they're saying. Okay, so they sometimes are testing the H sub O, or the null hypothesis, and sometimes they're testing the alternative hypothesis. So both of these things up here are true, you'll see, okay? But one is talking about the null hypothesis and the other one's talking about the alternative hypothesis. So instead of true and false like in mine, you're going to get true and true, but they're going to change the H sub O and the H sub A, okay? Now, here, instead of saying except, AP says fail to reject. This is technically correct, but it's not the way scientists talk. You never read a paper where someone says, I fail to reject this. They're going to say, I accept it, okay? But for AP, if you write accept, they will count it wrong. So you need to say, I fail to reject the null hypothesis. Seems like, well, what's the difference? There's all papers written about this. We're just going to have to take our word for it, okay? Or we reject H sub O. So everything is using the null hypothesis except for this one. Okay? And here we're not writing except, we're writing fail to reject. But the way we fill the inside is exactly the same because I've lined it up that way. So if I fail to reject and something is true, that's a correct decision. Okay? If I reject the null hypothesis, it means the alternative hypothesis must be true. Because you remember we covered all instances with our hypotheses. So here it's correct. Okay? Here we have a type 1 error. And here I have a type 2 error. Okay? So that is how error works. This is the way you're going to find it in your book. Okay? This is the way that I do it because it makes more sense to me because it's always dealing with H sub 0, okay, or the null hypothesis. Okay, I look forward to seeing you today, and we'll get started with inferential testing.